The dust hung thick in the air as Winona Vaughn stumbled into the main street of Copper Creek, her once pristine blue traveling dress now torn and soiled from her desperate escape. Blood trickled from her split lip, and bruises were beginning to form on her face. Behind her, heavy footsteps approached the thunderous gait of Harold Blackmore, the man she'd been forced to marry by mail 3 days prior, the man whose true nature had revealed itself in violence the moment they were alone. "You ain't going nowhere, woman," Harold bellowed, his voice carrying across the nearly empty street as townsfolk hurried indoors, unwilling to involve themselves in what appeared to be a domestic dispute. Winona's legs trembled beneath her as she tried to keep moving forward, but exhaustion and fear were taking their toll. She'd traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston to this dusty Colorado town in 1878, answering an advertisement for a wife, only to find herself trapped in a nightmare. "Please," she whispered, though no one seemed to be listening, "someone help me." As Harold closed the distance between them, his meaty hand reaching for her arm, a tall figure stepped between them, broad-shouldered and solid as a mountain. "That's far enough," said the stranger in a low, steady voice. His hand rested casually on the holstered Colt at his hip, but there was nothing casual about his stance. Winona looked up at her unexpected protector. Dust-covered boots, worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. A cowboy hat shaded his face, but she could see the firm set of his jaw and the unwavering intensity in his hazel eyes. "This ain't your business, cowboy," Harold snarled, his alcohol-laced breath cutting through the dry air. "That's my wife you're interfering with." "The lady looks like she doesn't want to go with you," the cowboy replied, not budging an inch. "And I make it my business when a man raises his hand to a woman in my town." Winona realized she was holding her breath. No one had ever stood up for her like this before. "Name's Hunter Granger," the cowboy said, not taking his eyes off Harold. "I'm the foreman at the Triple R ranch outside of town, and you are Harold Blackmore," the man growled. "And like I said, that's my wife, paid good money to bring her out here from back east." Hunter's expression hardened. "Madam, is that true?" Winona found her voice, though it came out shaky. "I answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride. I arrived 3 days ago, but she swallowed hard. He's not the man he claimed to be in his letters." Hunter nodded slightly. "Sounds to me like there's been some misunderstanding about the arrangement." Harold lunged forward suddenly, trying to reach around Hunter to grab Winona. "There's no misunderstanding. I paid for her, and she's mine." With a movement so swift it was almost imperceptible, Hunter's hand shot out, catching Harold by the wrist and twisting it back. The larger man howled in pain and surprise. "I don't think the lady wants to go with you," Hunter repeated, his voice deadly calm. "And people aren't property in this territory, mail-order bride or not." By now, a small crowd had begun to gather, watching the confrontation from a safe distance. The sheriff, a gray-haired man with a substantial mustache, pushed his way through. "What's the commotion here?" he demanded, his hand resting on his own holstered weapon. "This man is trying to steal my wife," Harold said immediately, wrenching his arm free from Hunter's grip. "She came running into town beaten and frightened," Hunter countered. "Ask anyone who saw her." The sheriff turned to Winona, his expression softening slightly when he saw the evidence of abuse on her face. "Madam, what's your side of this?" Winona straightened her shoulders, summoning what little courage she had left. "My name is Winona Vaughn," she hesitated, then corrected herself. "Blackmore now, I suppose. I came from Boston as Mr. Blackmore's mail-order bride. We were married by the minister upon my arrival." She touched her swollen lip gingerly. "This happened when I declined to submit to certain demands." The sheriff's face darkened. "Blackmore, is that true?" "A man's got rights with his wife," Harold insisted, his bloodshot eyes darting between the sheriff and Hunter. "She needs to learn her place." "Not in my town," the sheriff said firmly. "I suggest you cool off in the jail for the night. We'll sort this out in the morning." Harold's face contorted with rage. "You can't do that. She's my property." The sheriff nodded to 2 deputies who had joined the gathering. "Take him in, boys." As the deputies led a protesting Harold away, Winona felt her knees finally give way. Hunter caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms gentle as they supported her. Easy there, he said softly. You're safe now. The sheriff turned to Hunter. Can you see that the lady gets some medical attention and a safe place to stay tonight? Hunter nodded. My sister runs the boarding house. She'll look after her. Winona found herself being guided down the street. Hunter's steady presence beside her a strange comfort in this unfamiliar town that had already brought her so much pain. I don't know how to thank you, she managed to say as they walked slowly toward a neat two-story building with a sign that read Copper Creek Boarding House. No need for thanks, Hunter replied. No decent man could stand by and watch what was happening. He hesitated, then added, I'm sorry your introduction to our town has been so difficult. Winona attempted a smile, though it hurt her injured lip. It seems the West isn't quite what I imagined from the novels I've read. It can be harsh, Hunter admitted, but there's beauty here too. And good people. He stopped at the boarding house steps. My sister Hannah will take good care of you. I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right. Before Winona could respond, the door opened, and a woman with the same hazel eyes as Hunter appeared, her expression changing from welcome to concern when she saw Winona's condition. Hunter, what happened? She asked, quickly ushering them inside. Hannah, this is Mrs. Blackmore. She needs a safe place to stay and some tending to. Hannah's warm hand took Winona's. Come with me, dear. We'll get you cleaned up and settled. As Hunter tipped his hat and turned to leave, Winona found herself reluctant to see him go. In a town of strangers, he had been the only one to stand up for her, and something about his quiet strength made her feel safe for the first time since leaving Boston. Thank you, Mr. Granger, she called after him. He paused, looking back at her with a slight smile that transformed his serious face. Hunter, just Hunter is fine, madam. Winona, she replied. My name is Winona. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and then he was gone, striding back down the dusty street toward the livery stable where he'd left his horse. Hannah led Winona to a small but clean room on the second floor. Let's tend to those injuries, she said kindly, pouring water from a pitcher into a basin. Then you can tell me what brought you to our little corner of Colorado. As Hannah gently cleaned the cuts on Winona's face, the full weight of the day's events began to sink in. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Hannah patted her hand. First, you're going to rest. Tomorrow is time enough to worry about what comes next. Winona nodded gratefully, exhaustion overtaking her as Hannah helped her into a borrowed nightgown and turned down the covers on the narrow bed. Sleep well, Hannah said, adjusting the lamp to a low flame before quietly leaving the room. Left alone, Winona stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. Everything she had hoped for, a fresh start, a home of her own, perhaps eventually love had crumbled in just 3 days. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, it wasn't Harold's angry face that filled her mind, but the steady gaze of a cowboy who had stepped between her and danger without hesitation. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, waking Winona from a surprisingly deep sleep. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She touched her face gingerly, feeling the tender spots where Harold had struck her. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Winona, are you awake? Hannah's voice called. I've brought you some breakfast and clean clothes. Yes, please come in, Winona answered, sitting up in bed. Hannah entered with a tray and a bundle of fabric. I thought you might like to change out of that torn dress. These might be a bit large, but they're clean. You're too kind, Winona said, genuinely touched by the woman's thoughtfulness. I'm afraid I have very little money to repay your hospitality. Hannah waved away her concerns. Don't worry about that now. Eat your breakfast, get dressed, and then perhaps you'd like to come downstairs. The sheriff stopped by earlier. He'd like to speak with you when you're feeling up to it. Winona's stomach tightened with anxiety. Is Mr. Blackmore with him? No, Hannah assured her. Mr. Blackmore is still in the jail. The sheriff just wants to understand the situation better. She hesitated, then added, My brother is here as well. At the mention of Hunter, Winona felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. I'll come down as soon as I'm presentable. After Hannah left, Winona ate sparingly, her appetite diminished by nervousness. She donned the borrowed dress, a simple calico that hung loosely on her slender frame, and attempted to arrange her long auburn hair into something respectable without the aid of her brushes, which remained in the trunk at Harold's homestead. When she descended the stairs, she found Sheriff Williams, Hunter, and Hannah waiting in the small parlor of the boarding house. All three looked up as she entered, and Hunter immediately rose to his feet, his expression warming as he took in her appearance. "Mrs. Blackmore," the sheriff greeted her, "I hope you're feeling better this morning." "Thank you, yes," she replied, taking the offered seat, "though I must confess I'm uncertain about what happens next." The sheriff cleared his throat. "I've spoken with Mr. Blackmore. He insists you're legally his wife and that he has every right to discipline you as he sees fit." The older man's distaste for the concept was evident in his tone. "However, I've also consulted with Judge Peterson and there may be options for you." Winona leaned forward. "Options?" "The marriage could potentially be annulled, given the circumstances and the short duration," the sheriff explained. "But there's a complication. Blackmore says he paid for your passage west, purchased your trousseau, and provided a bride price to your family. He's demanding repayment." Winona's heart sank. "I have no means to repay such a sum. My family isn't wealthy, that's why I agreed to become a mail-order bride in the first place." Hunter, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "How much does he claim is owed?" The sheriff named a figure that made Winona blanch. "It might as well have been $1 million for all her ability to pay it." "That's robbery," Hunter said firmly. "Half of what he claims couldn't possibly be true. No trousseau I've ever seen would cost that much." "Nevertheless," the sheriff sighed, "without the funds to repay him, and with a legal marriage certificate, the judge's hands are somewhat tied." Winona felt the walls closing in around her. Was she to be forced back to a man who had already shown his true violent nature? "There's one other option," Hannah said quietly, exchanging a look with her brother. "Winona could find employment and work to pay off the debt over time." The sheriff nodded slowly. "That might be acceptable to the judge, though I doubt Blackmore will like it much." "I can work," Winona said quickly. "I was a teacher's assistant in Boston. I can sew, keep accounts, cook reasonably well. The school here needs a teacher," Hannah interrupted. "The last one left 2 months ago to get married. The town council's been looking for a replacement." Hope flared in Winona's heart. "I could do that. I love children and I have the necessary education." "And she could stay here at the boarding house," Hannah continued. "I could use help with the upkeep, and that would cover her room and board while her teaching salary goes toward the debt." The sheriff stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "It's not a bad plan. I'll speak to the town council and the judge." He stood, settling his hat on his head. "In the meantime, Mrs. Blackmore will remain in protective custody, so to speak. Blackmore won't be released until we have this sorted out." After the sheriff departed, Winona turned to Hannah and Hunter, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you both." "No thanks needed," Hannah said warmly. "Any decent person would do the same." Hunter's expression was more complex: concern, admiration, and something else Winona couldn't quite name. "I need to head back to the ranch, but I'll be in town again tomorrow," he said. "Is there anything you need from Blackmore's homestead?" "Your belongings," Winona hesitated. "My trunk. It has all my personal items, letters from my parents, my books." She didn't mention the photograph of her deceased younger sister, the most precious possession she owned. "I'll retrieve it for you," Hunter promised. "Blackmore's place is on the way to the R. "I couldn't ask you to, you didn't ask," he interrupted gently. "I offered." Their eyes met again, and that same inexplicable connection flared between them. Winona found herself wondering what it would be like to know this man better, this cowboy who had stepped between her and danger without hesitation. As if reading her thoughts, Hunter looked away first, a slight flush coloring his tan cheeks. "I should go. Cattle won't move themselves." After he left, Hannah showed Winona around the boarding house, explaining the routine and introducing her to the few current boarders: a land surveyor, an elderly widow, and a young bank clerk. "It's not much," Hannah admitted as they worked together to change linens in the empty rooms, "but it's home. Hunter and I came west after our parents died of influenza back in '69. He was just 19, I was 17. The R gave him work, and I eventually saved enough to buy this place when the previous owner decided to move to California." "You've made a good life for yourselves," Winona observed. Hannah smiled. "We have." The West offers opportunities, especially for women. Back east, a woman alone has few options, but here. She gestured around her. Here I own property, run a business. I answer to no one but myself. The concept was revolutionary to Winona, who had been raised to believe a woman's highest aspiration should be a suitable marriage. I never considered such independence possible, she admitted. Well, now you can, Hannah replied, though I suspect my brother might have other ideas about your future if that blush on his face when he looks at you is any indication. Winona felt her own cheeks warm. We've only just met. And I'm still married, technically. For now, Hannah said with a knowing smile, but I haven't seen Hunter look at any woman that way since Elizabeth Morgan broke his heart 3 years ago. Winona wanted to ask more about this Elizabeth, but propriety held her tongue. Instead, she focused on learning the boarding house routine, grateful for the distraction from her uncertain future. The following morning brought both good news and an unexpected visitor. Sheriff Williams arrived to inform Winona that the town council was eager to interview her for the teaching position, and that Judge Peterson was amenable to the arrangement of working to repay the debt to Harold. The judge wants to speak with you this afternoon, the sheriff explained. If he approves the plan, we can begin the process of annulling the marriage. Winona's relief was palpable. Thank you, Sheriff. I'll be ready. No sooner had the sheriff departed than Hunter arrived, pulling a wagon to a stop in front of the boarding house. On the back sat Winona's trunk and several smaller bags. Your belongings, madam, he said, tipping his hat as she stepped onto the porch. All accounted for, I believe. You actually went there. How did you manage to get my things? She asked, astonished. Hunter's expression darkened slightly. Let's just say Blackmore has a hired hand who doesn't share his employer's views on how to treat women. Fellow named Illy was happy to help me load the wagon. Together, they carried the trunk up to Winona's room. As Hunter set it down, Winona immediately knelt to open it, checking for her most precious possessions. Her fingers found the small silver frame containing her sister's photograph, and she clutched it to her chest with a sigh of relief. Hunter watched her, his expression softening. Someone important, my sister Grace, Winona explained, showing him the photograph. She died of scarlet fever when she was 16. I was 18. This is all I have left of her. Hunter nodded in understanding. I'm glad we got it back for you. There was an awkward pause, then Hunter cleared his throat. The sheriff mentioned you might be taking over as the town's teacher. If the council approves, Winona confirmed, I have an interview tomorrow. They'd be fools not to hire you, Hunter said with such conviction that Winona couldn't help but smile. You seem very certain for someone who knows very little about my qualifications, she teased gently. Hunter's eyes crinkled at the corners. I'm a good judge of character. Have to be in my line of work. Winona found herself wondering what it would be like to see that smile more often, to get to know the man behind the quiet strength and unflinching integrity, but she quickly reined in such thoughts. Her situation was still precarious, and romantic notions were what had led her into this mess in the first place. Thank you again for retrieving my belongings, she said, taking a step back. I'm sure you have duties to attend to at your ranch. Hunter seemed to sense her withdrawal and respected it, moving toward the door. I do, but I'll be back in town for supplies in a few days. Perhaps by then you'll be Copper Creek's new schoolmarm. Perhaps, she agreed. At the doorway he paused, turning back to her with an earnest expression. Winona, I want you to know that regardless of what happens with the teaching position or the annulment, you have friends here now. You're not alone. The simple statement, delivered without flourish or expectation, touched something deep within her. For the first time since arriving in Colorado, Winona felt a genuine sense of hope. Thank you, Hunter, she said softly. That means more than you know. The town council's interview was less intimidating than Winona had anticipated. The 5 council members, including the mayor, were primarily concerned with her educational background and experience with children. Her degree from the Boston Female Academy and her 2 years as an assistant teacher at a girls' school in Cambridge impressed them sufficiently. We can offer a salary of $40 per month, Mayor Simmons explained. The schoolhouse has a small attached living quarters, but until the situation with Mr. Blackmore is resolved, perhaps your arrangement at the boarding house is safer. Winona agreed, relieved that the council was aware of her circumstances and understanding. "When could you begin?" asked Mrs. Thornton, the only female council member. "Immediately," Winona replied eagerly. "I understand the children have been without instruction for some time." The council exchanged pleased glances. "Then we welcome you as Copper Creek's new teacher, Mrs. Blackmore or perhaps Miss Vaughn, soon enough," the mayor said with a smile. That afternoon, Judge Peterson heard Winona's case in his chambers. The elderly judge listened carefully to her account of Harold's deception and abuse, his bushy white eyebrows drawing together in disapproval. "Marriage is a sacred covenant," he said gravely when she had finished, "but it is based on mutual respect and honesty. From what you've described, Mr. Blackmore misrepresented himself in his letters and has shown a deplorable lack of the respect due to a wife." He shuffled through the papers before him. "I am inclined to grant an annulment, provided the financial matters can be settled." "Sheriff Williams tells me you have secured employment as our school teacher." "Yes, Your Honor," Winona confirmed. "I start next week." The judge nodded approvingly. "Very good. I propose that 20% of your salary be set aside to repay Mr. Blackmore's claimed expenses until the debt is settled. I have reduced the amount somewhat, as I find his claims excessive, but there remains a substantial sum." It would take years at that rate, but Winona nodded her acceptance. Any arrangement that freed her from Harold was worth it. "Mr. Blackmore will be released tomorrow," the judge continued, "with strict instructions to keep his distance from you. If he violates this order, he will face imprisonment. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor, thank you." As Winona left the courthouse, a weight lifted from her shoulders. She was not free yet, but she could see the path to freedom, and it led through the schoolhouse doors and the community that had so unexpectedly embraced her. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Winona threw herself into preparing the neglected schoolhouse, cleaning years of dust from corners, organizing books, and creating new teaching materials. Hannah helped when she could spare time from the boarding house, and several mothers of school-age children volunteered as well, eager to have their children return to formal education. Hunter visited town regularly, always finding reasons to stop by the schoolhouse. Sometimes he brought supplies: a box of new chalk, a globe with a cracked stand that he'd repaired, wildflowers to brighten up the place. Other times he simply offered his labor, fixing the sagging front steps or the stuck window in the back of the classroom. Winona found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and alarmed her. She was still technically married, still indebted to Harold, still establishing herself in this new community. And yet, each time Hunter's tall figure appeared in the schoolhouse doorway, her heart beat a little faster. Harold, meanwhile, had retreated to his homestead after his release from jail. The town had made its stance clear. Winona was under their protection now. On the rare occasions when Harold came to town for supplies, he kept his distance, though his glares promised that he had not forgotten or forgiven what he considered a theft of his property. One evening in late September, after school had been in session for 3 weeks, Winona was walking back to the boarding house when she heard quick footsteps behind her. Turning, she was relieved to see Hunter approaching rather than Harold, as she had initially feared. "Evening, Miss Vaughn," he said, using the name she had reverted to professionally, though her annulment was not yet final. "Mind if I walk with you?" "Not at all," she replied, noting that he had cleaned up. His usually dusty clothes were fresh, his dark hair damp from a recent washing. "What brings you to town? I didn't see you at the schoolhouse today." "Had business with the bank," he explained. "And actually, I was hoping to catch you. There's a harvest social on Saturday at the Triple R. The whole town's invited. I wondered if you might like to attend." The invitation took her by surprise. A social? Hunter looked suddenly uncertain. "It's nothing fancy, just food, some music, dancing under the stars. The ranch does it every year to thank the town for its support." Winona hesitated. It sounded wonderful, but would it be appropriate? "Given my situation, you're the town's teacher now," Hunter said firmly, "and you're in the process of having your marriage annulled. Besides, it's not as if I'm asking to court you formally." He paused, a flush creeping up his neck. "Though I'd like to when the time is right." The directness of his statement left Winona momentarily speechless. Here was no flowery deception like Harold's letters, just honest intent plainly stated. "I would like to attend the social," she finally said. "Very much." Hunter's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I'll come by the boarding house at 4 on Saturday, then." As they continued walking, their hands brushed accidentally, sending a jolt of awareness through Winona. She didn't pull away, and neither did Hunter. By the time they reached the boarding house, their fingers had somehow become intertwined. "Good night, Winona," Hunter said softly, reluctantly releasing her hand as they reached the porch. "Good night, Hunter," she replied, equally reluctant to end the moment. She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. And for the first time since arriving in Copper Creek, Winona felt that she might have found not just safety and independence, but the possibility of something she had almost stopped believing in: true love based on respect and admiration rather than false promises. Saturday dawned clear and crisp, the aspens in the surrounding hills ablaze with golden color. Winona spent the morning helping her students prepare harvest decorations for the social, then returned to the boarding house to prepare herself. Hannah, who had become a true friend over the past weeks, helped her arrange her hair and loaned her a shawl to complement her best dress, a deep green that brought out the emerald of her eyes. "My brother won't know what hit him," Hannah teased as Winona surveyed her reflection nervously. "Though he's already smitten, as anyone with eyes can see." "Hannah," Winona protested, though she couldn't suppress a pleased smile. A knock at the boarding house door announced Hunter's arrival. When Winona descended the stairs, she found him waiting in the parlor, hat in hand, wearing a clean white shirt with a string tie, dark vest, and his best pair of denims. He stared at her as if seeing a vision. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You look quite handsome yourself." Hannah shooed them toward the door. "Go on, you two, the wagon's waiting and you don't want to miss the start of the festivities." The drive to the Triple R took them out of town and along winding trails through golden aspen groves. Hunter pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his years on the ranch, and Winona found herself captivated by his obvious love for the land and his work. The ranch itself was impressive, a sprawling main house, bunkhouse, barns, and corrals, all nestled in a valley with mountains rising majestically behind. Lanterns had been strung between posts, creating a festive atmosphere in the large cleared area where tables laden with food were set up, and a small group of musicians were tuning their instruments. "Hunter, you made it," called a robust man with a silver-streaked beard. "And this must be our new schoolteacher we've heard so much about. Miss Vaughn, this is Randall Richardson, owner of the Triple R," Hunter introduced them. "The R himself," Winona said with a smile, shaking the rancher's hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "The pleasure's all mine," Richardson replied. "Hunter here hasn't stopped talking about you since the day he met you, never seen him so taken with anyone." "Mr. Richardson," Hunter protested, shooting his employer a look. The older man just laughed. "Truth is truth, son. Now get this young lady some refreshments and show her around. The dancing will start soon enough." As the evening progressed, Winona was introduced to the ranch hands, their families, and many townspeople she hadn't yet met. Everyone welcomed her warmly, and she found herself relaxing and truly enjoying herself for the first time in months. When the fiddlers struck up a lively tune, Hunter turned to her with an outstretched hand. "May I have this dance?" Winona hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I must warn you, I'm not familiar with your Western dances." "Just follow my lead," Hunter said, guiding her to the cleared space where couples were already twirling. To her surprise, Winona found the dance steps easy to follow with Hunter's gentle guidance. They moved together as if they'd been dancing partners for years, his hand steady at her waist, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. When the music shifted to a slower waltz, he drew her closer, and she went willingly, captivated by the warmth in his hazel eyes. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," Hunter said quietly, just for her ears. "What way?" Winona asked, though she thought she knew. "Like the world makes sense, like there's a future worth building." He swallowed hard. "Like there's someone worth building it with." Before Winona could respond, a commotion at the edge of the gathering interrupted the moment. Voices were raised in alarm and the music faltered. "Where is she?" A familiar, slurred voice demanded. "Where's my wife?" Winona froze in Hunter's arms. Harold Blackmore had found her, and from the sound of his voice he was drunk and angry. Hunter's expression hardened. "Stay here," he instructed, guiding Winona toward Hannah, who had materialized at her side. "Hannah, take care of her." "Hunter, don't," Winona began, but he was already striding toward the disturbance, where Harold was pushing past Richardson's attempts to calm him. "Blackmore," Hunter called, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "You're not welcome here." Harold's bloodshot eyes found Hunter, and his face twisted with rage. You're the one who stole my wife, turned the whole town against me, made me a laughingstock." "You did that yourself when you raised your hand to an innocent woman," Hunter replied evenly. "Now I'm asking you politely to leave." "Not without what's mine," Harold snarled, reaching for something at his waist, a pistol. Winona realized with horror several things happened at once. Richardson shouted a warning, women screamed, men moved to shield their families. And Hunter lunged forward, tackling Harold just as the gun discharged, the bullet harmlessly hitting the ground. The two men grappled in the dust, Hunter's superior strength and sobriety giving him the advantage despite Harold's greater bulk. Within moments, Hunter had disarmed Harold and pinned him to the ground. Sheriff Williams, who had been enjoying the social with his wife, hurried over with his deputy. "I'll take it from here, Granger," he said grimly, producing a pair of handcuffs. As Harold was led away, shouting obscenities and threats, Hunter returned to Winona's side, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though she was shaking. "I'm fine, but you could have been killed." Hunter brushed a strand of hair from her face with a gentle finger. "He wasn't going to hurt anyone else on my watch, especially not you." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The social continued, though with a subdued atmosphere. Hunter stayed close to Winona's side, protective but not smothering, seeming to sense when she needed space to process what had happened and when she needed his reassuring presence. As the night drew to a close and they prepared to return to town, Winona found herself reluctant to end their time together, despite the disruption. "Thank you for inviting me tonight," she said as Hunter helped her into the wagon. "Despite everything, I had a wonderful time." Hunter settled beside her, taking up the reins. "I'm sorry about Blackmore. The sheriff will keep him locked up this time. Threatening people with a firearm is a serious offense." "What will happen to him?" Winona asked. "Most likely he'll be sent to the territorial prison for a few years," Hunter replied. "And Judge Peterson will almost certainly grant your annulment now, given the circumstances." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the night air cool and fragrant with pine and sage. The stars above were brilliant in the clear mountain sky, more stars than Winona had ever seen back east. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "I came west seeking a new life, and despite everything, I think I've found it." Hunter glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Is it the life you imagined?" Winona considered the question. "No," she admitted. "It's nothing like I imagined. It's real, with real dangers and difficulties, but also with real joy and real connections." She looked at him directly. "Real feelings." Hunter brought the wagon to a stop on a ridge overlooking the town, its few lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. He set the brake and turned to face her fully. "Winona," he began, then paused, gathering his thoughts. "I know it's too soon. You're still dealing with everything that's happened, still building your place here. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I would be honored to court you properly." The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. This was no deceptive letter full of empty promises, but a man offering his heart honestly with no expectations. "Hunter," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotions welling within her, "I don't need more time to know how I feel. These past weeks have shown me your character, your kindness, your strength. When my annulment is granted, I would welcome your courtship." The joy that spread across his face was like nothing she had ever seen, transforming his usually serious features into something radiant. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers in the gentlest of kisses. When they separated, Winona felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her world. This was what she had hoped to find when she answered that advertisement months ago, not just security or escape, but connection, respect, and the promise of love. "We should get back," Hunter said reluctantly, though he made no move to release the brake. Hannah will be wondering what's keeping us. Just a few more minutes, Winona requested, leaning her head against his shoulder as they gazed at the starlit sky. I want to remember this moment exactly as it is. Hunter's arm encircled her shoulders and he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. We'll have many more moments to remember, Winona. I promise you that. And as they sat together under the vast western sky, Winona knew with absolute certainty that this was one promise that would be kept. Harold Blackmore was sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison for assault with a deadly weapon. Judge Peterson granted Winona's annulment immediately, declaring that the marriage had been based on fraudulent representations and had never been consummated in the true sense of marital union. With her freedom officially restored, Winona threw herself into her teaching duties with renewed vigor. The children of Copper Creek thrived under her guidance, and parents marveled at the transformation in their once reluctant scholars. The town council, pleased with their decision to hire her, voted to increase her salary after just 6 months. Hunter courted her properly, as he had promised. He brought her wildflowers and books ordered specially from Denver. He escorted her to church socials and town gatherings. He built bookshelves for her classroom and repaired the roof of the schoolhouse when winter storms damaged it. Most importantly, he listened to her hopes and fears, her ideas and opinions. He valued her mind as much as her heart, and in doing so, helped her heal from the wounds of Harold's betrayal and abuse. A year after their first meeting, on a perfect spring day with the mountains still capped with snow but wildflowers blooming in the valleys, Hunter and Winona were married in the Copper Creek Church. Hannah stood as Winona's maid of honor, and Richardson gave the bride away, having become a father figure to both Granger siblings over the years. I take you, Winona, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Hunter vowed, his voice steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. When Winona repeated the vows, she did so with absolute conviction. This was the partnership she had dreamed of, one built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and unwavering trust. Their first home was a small cabin on Triple R land, as Hunter continued his work as ranch foreman. Winona rode to town each day to teach, returning in the evenings to their cozy dwelling with its growing collection of books and the wildflower garden Hunter had planted for her. 2 years later, with Richardson's blessing and financial backing, they purchased their own modest ranch adjacent to the Triple R. They named it the GV Ranch for Granger Vaughn, honoring both their family legacies. Hunter proved to be as skilled a rancher as he had been a foreman, and the operation prospered under their joint management. When their first child was born, a daughter they named Grace, after Winona's sister, their happiness seemed complete. Yet life continued to bring new joys. A son 2 years later, the expansion of their ranch, the growth of the community they both loved. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose, Winona turned to her husband with eyes full of gratitude and love. "Do you remember that day in Copper Creek?" she asked. "When I stumbled into the street, fleeing from Harold," Hunter nodded, taking her hand in his. "How could I forget? It was the day I found you." "I was so frightened, so lost," Winona mused. "I never imagined that moment would lead to all of this, to you, to our children, to this life we've built together." Hunter raised her hand to his lips, kissing it tenderly. "I knew the moment I saw you that you were someone worth fighting for. I just never dreamed how much joy that fight would bring us both." As the last rays of sunlight gilded the land they had come to love, Winona rested her head against the shoulder of the cowboy who had once stood between her and danger, never knowing he was also standing between her and a lifetime of happiness. Sometimes, she reflected, the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful destinations.